I wonder what's on TV.
Hi. Ah. Welcome back to another episode of my insanity. So we're back here. We're stuck. We're kind of stuck. And I gotta figure out how to get to the fucking... Get the fuck out of here. Excuse me. Wrong way. I've got some noodles, but I already ate some, so I hate that when you have two packages. I mean, you have multiple packages of noodles. You're pretty sure one isn't going to be filling, and then you eat one, but you made two, and now you can't finish the other. What were they thinking? What was I thinking? Do I have any sound? No. Now I do, sort of. Holy moly. 320s. I can't tell if there's sound in my mind. There's... Wait, I can hear stuff. Faintly. No. Okay. We... It sucks I can't climb on stuff. It doesn't look that bad for a 2001 game. There's Easy Prey up here. I don't know if I've ever really been up to the second floor. Maybe. Are you gonna aggro me? Yep. Bye. Can I get up here? They're still chasing me? Give up soon. Maybe. Shit. I might get a chain. No, I lost hate. So I gotta get out of here. I gotta go to the Den of Rancor. It's the only place to find Tonberries consistently. Or at least reaching the place without fucking going nuts. Do I already have this on? Yes. Let us go. Let us make haste. So, there's no sound. I was thinking about putting on something, or listening to something, or contemplating something. You know, the usual. haven't been here so long, but it's exactly like Bestock, so I think I did all the missions for this area. I think this is where the Unity warp is. Or I could be wrong. Where's Narcisa? Is that them? One second. Oh, I suddenly forgot where Data Rancor is. Because I'm a silly head. Dumb fuck. That's over in fucking... That is in the jungle, but don't I have a fucking... I can't warp there. Quick travels. What the fuck are Unity warps? I suddenly forgot. Oh, Unity warps at... Wait, what? Holy cock and dolly old bob under that. Uh, I am. Daggett. The F slur. Challenge for another home point? Sure. Let's go to Old Bastock. Please. Ken and Marin. I'm looking for someone named Ix. What? Ixley? Do you have help? Are you threatening me? I want to change. What? Sure. Oops. Okay. Pull up. I don't want items. I want to warp. Wait. I have to be level 128. What the fuck? Wait. Ah! Man, getting these fucking tom berries is really fucking a thing. I'm pretty sure I've been there. I just don't remember when. I don't have a home point? Home point 1? Wait, what? Shit. I don't think I have. Talk to the NPC. Select. Bring me to the wanted encounter. Select. Is it this guy or is it someone else? Oh. Okay. Whee! Oh, Lord. That took a second. Um. Holy shit. Let's get out the entire party. I don't know how fucking hard these people are gonna be. As I eat my ramen. Like a weeb ass bitch. I'm gonna be Japanese someday. There's a character in King of Fighters named Lucky Grobber. Grobber? He was like supposed to originally be like a weeb, I think. A black weeb. Black man weeb. Saddam's a weeb in Street Fighter Alpha. He's supposed to be a weeb. There's probably some other weebs. Or otakus. The fuck? Oh, Valnaro? Valerio? Valal... What is your name? Valena. Valenro. Valenro. I can never remember it. Valenro. Valenero. Valenero. You're the best tank I have. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Korumon. Let's put Roche's coffin. That big ass motherfucker. So, middle-aged dad bods. Oh, you die, man. You gotta have die. I remember. Shut the door. Shut the door. Shut the door. What I do? Look for the berries. What which one? Thornberry slasher? Perhaps? What does that say? It's I'm not sure what the slashers. Here's the slashers. They're into slash flicks. Like Black Christmas, Halloween, Friday the 13th, Pokemon Snap. Is something gonna aggro me if I fall? Or do I have to fill up my hide? Oh, let me get my shadow. So, Tower Plunges. And so it's hide. Except bats and things that can aggro the sound. Like those bats and those bats. What the? Maybe these bats don't act. Never mind. Hey, while we farm for a fucking key off some garbage mobs, let's watch Dr. Grande. He always puts me in a particular mood. Questioning reality. Very often. Where is Dr. Grande's latest video? Dr. Grande. Calling Dr. Grande.
This is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Yoooo Air Flight 2216. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. This case involves an aircraft crash in South Korea. The aircraft involved was a Boeing 737-800. This design is part of the 737 Next Generation series, sometimes simply referred to as NG. This is the third generation of the 737, but for some reason they didn't name it third generation. They went with next generation. The series includes 5 variants: the 737, 600, 700, 800, 900, and 900 extended range. The first NG flew in 1997. The 737-800 is the best-selling version. There are over 4,300 of this model in service around the world. In 2019, the NG series was discontinued. 3 years earlier, in 2016, the first Boeing 737 MAX took to the air, which is the 4th generation 737. The 737-800 involved in this case was manufactured in 2009 and delivered to Ryanair. In 2017, it was transferred to Jeju Air. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On December 8, 2024, Jeju Air resumed service to Muan International Airport in South Korea after the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted operations. 21 days later, on December 29, 2024, a Boeing 737-800 operating as Jeju Air Flight 2216 departed from Suvarnabhumi Airport near Bangkok, Thailand at 2:28 a.m. 181 people were on board, 175 were passengers, 6 were crew members. The majority of the passengers were returning from a trip arranged by a travel agency. They had spent 5 days in Bangkok as part of a Christmas tour. After what seemed to be a normal flight, the aircraft was preparing to land at Muan International Airport. This airport has a single runway, which is just under 9,200 feet long. Most runways can be used in both directions and have separate designations for each direction. The designations for this runway are 01 and 19. Flight 2216 was planning to land on runway 01. Their approach started at 8:54 a.m. At 8:57 a.m., air traffic controllers warned the flight crew that there was a risk of a bird strike. This airport is notorious for bird strikes, the worst airport in South Korea for this phenomenon, with 1 out of every 1,000 flights being affected. That may not seem like a lot, but in the realm of bird strikes, it's pretty high. At 8:58 a.m., a minute after the warning, the flight crew declared an emergency. It appears as though the number 2 engine, that is the engine to the right of the captain looking forward, was damaged by a bird strike. The aircraft executed a go-around maneuver and at 9:01 a.m. was cleared to land on runway 19. So they were going to land on the same runway going in the opposite direction. The flight crew attempted to land at 9:03 a.m. The aircraft could be seen coming in faster than expected, and the flaps were not in the landing position. In addition, the landing gear was retracted, so this was a belly landing. The aircraft made contact with the runway about 4,000 feet from the beginning. Again, the runway was just under 9,200 feet long, so the aircraft had lost the use of almost half the runway. The aircraft skidded off the south end of the runway and slammed into a concrete wall about 460 feet beyond the runway.
Why is there a
This
wall?
is where the ILS array was mounted, the instrument landing system. After slamming into the wall, the aircraft burst into flames. 179 of the 181 people on board were killed. Bodies were found as far as 600 feet from the wreckage. The 2 survivors were both flight attendants. They had been in the back of the aircraft in their jump seats. One was male and one was female. One of the survivors reported that one of the engines started smoking after a suspected bird strike before exploding. Both the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder were recovered from the aircraft. At the time I'm making this video, the cause of the crash remains a mystery. However, it is very likely investigators will eventually figure out what led to this tragedy. Now moving to my analysis. There are a few elements in this crash that don't make sense. The primary mystery is this: why didn't the flight crew take their time before attempting to land? Presumably, the bird strike damaged the number 2 engine, so that engine was not producing power. They still had the number 1 engine, which would have been sufficient to operate all the systems. The flight crew could have done everything they needed to do with that remaining engine. For instance, deploy the landing gear and put the flaps in the correct position for landing. Furthermore, they could have activated the auxiliary power unit. This unit doesn't provide propulsion, but it would provide power to operate systems like the landing gear and control surfaces. Safely landing the aircraft should not have been a problem with the loss of an engine. When the bird strike occurred, the flight crew had two choices: immediately land the aircraft with the one operating engine, or abort the landing and, essentially, fly in a circle while preparing the aircraft for landing with one engine. This would give them time to go through all the checklist items for this procedure. Instead of immediately landing, or taking a long time to prepare, the aircraft just went around to the other end of the runway and attempted a very dangerous landing. No landing gear, the flaps were not in the right position, it just makes no sense. They would have been better off attempting to land immediately rather than executing this maneuver. What happened here? Why would they make this decision? There are a few possibilities. Let's take a look at three of the theories in this case. Theory number one is that the bird strike somehow took out both engines. So not just the number 2 engine, but the number 1 engine as well. This has happened before. For example,
we got a
in
copy.
2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 ditched in the Hudson River after bird strikes disabled both engines. In that case, everybody survived. In the case of Flight 2216, there is no reason to believe that engine number 1 was affected by a bird strike. If it was affected and the aircraft had no power, why didn't the flight crew immediately land? Theory number 2 is that, in addition to engine number 2, the landing gear and the flaps were somehow damaged by the birds. So engine number 1 was fine, there was power, the problem was the actual systems themselves. I never heard of a bird strike disabling the landing gear and the flaps on a large jet aircraft like a 737. There would be no way for birds to make contact with landing gear that was retracted, and the flaps are on the trailing edge of the wings. Bird strikes typically affect areas like the leading edge of the wings, the engines, and the nose. Even if this was somehow possible, there are redundant systems on these aircraft to make sure these systems remain functional. It is very unlikely that both systems failed at the same time. Furthermore, both the landing gear and the flaps can be deployed manually. No power is necessary to get them in position for landing. Theory number 3 is that the flight crew panicked and accidentally shut down engine number 1 when trying to react to the failure of engine number 2. This has happened before in the history of commercial aviation and even involved the same engine positions. Trans-Asia Airways Flight 235 crashed in Taiwan after the pilot responded to the loss of engine number 2 by shutting down engine number 1. Making the same mistake, the flight crew on Flight 2216 did not have the time or the presence of mind to manually deploy the landing gear and the flaps. The aircraft was coming down one way or the other, so they attempted a belly landing on the runway. Another version of this theory is the flight crew panicked and simply forgot to deploy the landing gear and the flaps. Like they were just so worried about getting on the ground, they immediately attempted the landing. Based on what little is known at this time, in my opinion, I think that theory number 3 is probably the most likely. The version of this theory where the flight crew shut down engine number 1 is more likely than them forgetting to deploy the landing gear and the flaps. But either way, panic was the major contributor to the tragedy. About 75% of all commercial aviation crashes are due, at least in part, to human error. The bird strike created an emergency which could have been managed successfully. Unfortunately, the pilots panicked and were unable to execute the correct procedures to land safely. Again, this is just my opinion. The investigation could find something completely different. Maybe something happened which is not covered by any of the 3 theories. Perhaps a fire broke out and the flight crew could not see or breathe, or some other problem pressured them to land quickly. No matter what the cause of the collision was, one definite problem in this case was that concrete wall being so close to the end of the runway. If that wall had not been there, I think it's likely that no one would have been killed in this crash. The aircraft would have had enough distance to come to a stop on its own. Now moving to my final thoughts. Fatal crashes in commercial aviation are exceedingly rare, but each one has a major impact on the way people think about flying. About 20% of people are afraid of flying, and crashes like this do not reduce that level of fear. Statistically, flying on a commercial airliner is exceptionally safe. When considering the overall risk, we can look at the U.S. air travel data from 2002 to 2022. Here we see there were an average of 33 injuries per year. When looking at motor vehicles on U.S. highways during the same time range, 2.3 million people per year were injured. So 33 versus 2.3 million. Driving for 12 minutes is riskier than taking a 6-hour flight. So the trip to the airport is almost certainly more dangerous than the flight itself. Another way to examine the safety record is to consider the number of fatalities compared to the number of aircraft boardings. That is the number of times a person gets on a plane. In the United States, from 2018 to 2022, there was 1 fatality for every 13.7 million boardings. Tragedies like Flight 2216 serve as a reminder that the exceptional safety record of commercial aviation has always depended on learning from mistakes. When the investigation is complete, no doubt there will be at least a few recommendations to enhance airline safety. Those are my thoughts on the case of Jeju Air Flight 2216. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Whenever people have a lot of time to make a decision, like when engineers can spend years looking at data, decisions tend to be pretty good. When people have to make decisions quickly, even if there is a set procedure to follow, which would maximize the potential for safety, decisions tend to be poor. So commercial aviation safety is really limited by the human factor, specifically trying to make fast decisions under pressure. If the pilots, in this case, for instance, did not have to worry about their lives ending or the lives of all the passengers and other crew members ending, then that would also take off a lot of pressure. So it's not just the time, it is what is at stake. Everything is at stake. Pilots in an emergency are under a tremendous amount of pressure in many ways to make the right decisions. In this case, it appears as though the pilots did not. Again, I don't know for certain, but it's not looking good for them. Unfortunately, this is pretty common. Even in situations where things went well and a crash was avoided, investigators often find that the pilots could have done things better. So the human factor is really limiting to commercial aviation. The mechanical factors, I think the engineers have down pretty well, not perfectly, as we've seen in recent times with certain failures in components with aircraft. For instance, Boeing has been beleaguered by various accusations. But overall, engineers tend to have the mechanical aspects dialed in pretty well. They know what makes a plane
I was curious about the... I didn't mean to cut it off so early. I was just going to put on another video soon, but... Did I even finish it?
were injured. So 33 versus 2.3 million. Driving for 12 minutes in an emergency are under a tremendous amount of beleaguered by various accusations. But overall, engineers tend to have the mechanical aspects dialed in pretty well. They know what makes a plane fly and they know what makes a plane crash. The human factor is the part that will probably never be resolved. It will never be perfect. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Courtney Edwards. First, I will look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Courtney Nichelle Edwards was born on September 3, 1988 in Pensacola, Florida. She graduated from high school in Tallahassee, but eventually ended up in Montgomery, Alabama. Courtney had 3 children and was a single parent. In November 2021, she started working as a ground handling agent for Piedmont Airlines. This is a regional airline owned by American Airlines. Courtney's job was located at the Montgomery Regional Airport, where she often worked weekends. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On December 31, 2022, Courtney started work at around 2 p.m. and was scheduled for a 10-hour shift. That day, Envoy Air Flight 3408, which was operating as American Eagle, flew from the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport to the Montgomery Regional Airport. The aircraft was an Embraer ERJ 170-200LR. The marketing designation for this aircraft is Embraer 175LR, so it's often referred to by this designation or simply Embraer 175. This is a narrow-body, twin-engine jet airliner which is used for short to medium-range routes. The aircraft has 81 seats and a maximum takeoff weight of 82,000 pounds. Each engine is rated at 13,420 pounds of thrust. Just to put this in perspective, a Boeing 777-300 has a maximum takeoff weight of 660,000 pounds, and each engine generates 115,000 pounds of thrust. The Embraer 175 is a much smaller aircraft. There were 59 passengers and 4 crew members on Flight 3408. The aircraft arrived at 3:35 p.m. and taxied to gate number 4. Both engines were running at this time. This particular aircraft had an inoperative auxiliary power unit, or APU. This would normally provide power when the engines were off, but with it not working, at least one of the engines needed to remain on until the aircraft could be connected to ground power. At 3:38 p.m., the captain started shutting down the number 2 engine, which is on the right side of the aircraft from the captain's perspective looking forward. The number 1 engine, which is on the left side, remained running. After noticing that the forward cargo door had been accessed, the first officer opened the cockpit window and told the ramp agents the engines were still running. Nobody was supposed to approach the aircraft with the engines running other than to chock the front wheel. At 3:39 p.m., the captain noticed the fail symbol on his engine display. A few seconds later, he felt the aircraft shake violently and saw that the number 1 engine had shut down. It did not spool down, rather it shut down suddenly. The captain left the flight deck, walked to first class, and looked out of the cabin window. On the pavement in front of the number 1 engine, he saw a body and body parts. The captain closed the window shades and asked the passengers not to reopen them. Here is what the investigation by the NTSB revealed. The body in front of engine number 1 belonged to Courtney Edwards. She had been ingested by the engine. The engine stopped and her body fell forward. Her body was not pulled through the engine. Nobody else was physically injured in the incident. Investigators were able to figure out the sequence of events that led up to the tragedy. 10 minutes before Flight 3408 arrived at the airport, the lead ramp agent held a safety briefing. He told the ground crew that the engines of the aircraft would remain running until ground power was connected. Nobody was to approach the aircraft while the engines were running. Normally, safety cones would be placed at various points around the aircraft, but that should not happen until the engines had been turned off and spooled down, and the flight crew deactivated the red beacon lights. Immediately before the aircraft reached the gate, the lead ramp agent held a second safety huddle, where he repeated the same message. The engines would be running, and the aircraft should not be approached. Surveillance video revealed that after the aircraft was marshaled to the gate, and the nose wheel was chocked by the lead ramp agent, Courtney started walking toward the tail of the aircraft to put down a safety cone. When she approached the jet blast area behind the number 1 engine, she stumbled and continued walking. After this, she walked toward the left wingtip, then back toward the fuselage. Courtney stepped in front of the number 1 engine and turned to her left, which was away from the engine. At this point, her left leg moved back toward the number 1 engine. As her left foot touched the ground, her right leg lifted off the ground and moved upward. Her torso entered the engine inlet, and her left leg lifted off the ground and entered as well. Courtney's cause of death was multiple blunt force injuries. At the time of the incident, the upper and lower red beacon lights on the aircraft were illuminated. Only after it was safe, Courtney was supposed to place a cone at the left wingtip, walk to the tail of the aircraft and place another cone, then continue to the right side to assist with baggage unloading. None of her duties involved being in front of the number 1 engine. The lead ramp agent said that after he set the chocks on the nose wheel, he saw Courtney getting ready to place a safety cone by the tail. He yelled at her and motioned for her to move away from the aircraft. She began to move away, and the lead ramp agent turned away from her to lower the ground power cord. A few seconds later, he heard a bang and noticed that the number 1 engine had shut down. As I mentioned, Courtney started working for Piedmont Airlines in November 2021. She was the subject of a corrective action in December of that year after demonstrating unsatisfactory performance. The report said that she would get stuck on one task and not move forward to another. She was told to improve or she would be fired. Presumably, she improved because she still had her job when she was killed. In August 2022, Courtney found herself in trouble again. She had been asked on numerous occasions to ensure her appearance was consistent with company standards. Specifically, her uniform and her hair were unacceptable. Once again, presumably, Courtney must have addressed the issue. As far as her physical health, Courtney had a few problems. She suffered from obesity, diabetes, and multiple sclerosis. During her last visit with her neurologist, Courtney stated that on occasion, her legs go to spaghetti and her arms don't cooperate. The neurologist felt as though Courtney's condition was stable and made no changes to her treatment. An autopsy was performed on Courtney's body, although due to the nature of her death, her brain was not available for examination. It was revealed that Courtney had cannabis in her system. The NTSB concluded that cannabis use and medical factors caused Courtney to be cognitively impaired. As a result, she demonstrated deficient judgment, which led to her death. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. In front of each engine on the Embraer 175, there is an inlet hazard area, which is also called the ingestion zone. The area is defined by an 8.3-foot radius from the engine inlet, meaning a person should never get closer than that when the engine is running. There is also an exhaust hazard area behind the engine, which extends back 85 feet. The operations manual that Courtney was subject to indicated that she was to stay at least 15 feet away from the front of a running engine and 100 feet away from the rear. On the day she was killed, Courtney entered both areas. She walked behind the engine, and it almost blew her over. When she was done committing that safety violation, she committed another one by walking in front of the engine. The second violation came with a severe penalty. It was fatal. Even if Courtney somehow didn't realize that it was the number one engine that caused her to stumble, aircraft engines are incredibly loud. Even when only one is running, it is obvious to everyone. Furthermore, the red beacon lights were active, which meant the aircraft was not safe to approach. Item number 2. As part of the NTSB investigation, statements were taken from many witnesses. Not surprisingly, most of the statements were quite similar, with each witness having a slightly different perspective, like they were standing someplace different when the tragedy occurred. One theme throughout many of the statements was how horrible and traumatic this tragedy was. After the ingestion, children were screaming in terror, passengers were crying, and gate agents were huddled together trying to keep each other standing up. This was one of the most horrible things, if not the most horrible thing, that many of these people had ever seen. Courtney's death was extremely violent. Item number 3. As I mentioned, the APU on the aircraft was not functioning, which is why one engine had to stay on at the gate. There are certain items which can be inoperative or unavailable on a commercial aircraft, and the aircraft is still permitted to fly. This is called the minimum equipment list. The aircraft involved in this incident was permitted to be operated without the APU being functional. The APU wasn't the only problem. The first officer's dome light was also not working. I realize that it is not practical to demand that everything on a commercial aircraft is functioning 100% of the time. But if the APU had been working, Courtney would not have been killed. The change in routine caused by the non-functioning APU added one more level of complexity that Courtney could not handle. This brings me to item number 4. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. There are several possibilities to consider here. Theory number 1, the aircraft involved in this incident was permitted to be operated without the APU being missed. The aircraft involved in this incident was permitted to be operated. The minimum had to stay on at the gate. Item number 2, as part of the NTSB investigation, statements were taken from many witnesses. Not surprisingly, most of the statements were quite similar, with each witness having a slightly different perspective, like they were standing someplace different when the tragedy occurred. One theme throughout many of the statements was how horrible and traumatic this tragedy was. After the ingestion, children were screaming in terror, passengers were crying, and gate agents were huddled together trying to keep each other standing up. This was one of the most horrible things, if not the most horrible thing, that many of these people had ever seen. Courtney's death was extremely violent. Item number 3. As I mentioned, the APU on the aircraft was not functioning, which is why one engine had to stay on at the gate. There are certain items which can be inoperative or unavailable on a commercial aircraft, and the aircraft is still permitted to fly. This is called the minimum equipment list. The aircraft involved in this incident was permitted to be operated without the APU being functional. The APU wasn't the only problem. The first officer's dome light was also not working. I realize that it is not practical to demand that everything on a commercial aircraft is functioning 100% of the time. But if the APU had been working, Courtney would not have been killed. The change in routine caused by the non-functioning APU added one more. The change in routine, if the APU had been working, Courtney would not have been killed. That it is not practical to demand that everything on a commercial aircraft. There are certain items which can be inoperative or unavailable on a commercial aircraft, and the aircraft is still permitted to fly. This is called the minimum equipment list. The aircraft involved in this incident was permitted to be operated without the APU being functional. The APU wasn't the only problem. The first officer's dome light was also not working. I realize that it is not practical to demand that everything on a commercial aircraft is functioning 100% of the time. But if the APU had been working, Courtney would not have been killed. The change in routine caused by the non-functioning APU added one more level of complexity that Courtney could not handle. This brings me to item number 4. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. There are several possibilities to consider here. Theory number 1 is cognitive impairment. As I mentioned, investigators believe that Courtney was cognitively impaired from cannabis use and her medical problems, almost like she was in some type of zombie state, just wandering around in front of the aircraft. Theory number 2 is that Courtney stepped in front of the engine because she simply didn't care about following the rules. She heard her supervisor tell her not to approach the aircraft, but she did it anyway. Theory number 3 is that Courtney was simply not paying attention, but this wasn't due to any type of cognitive impairment. Under this theory, she did not deliberately break the rules. Another way to divide up these theories is to place theory number 1 in one category and merge theories 2 and 3 into a second category. Essentially, it comes down to cognitive impairment or not. What is the most likely explanation? In my opinion, I think it's more likely that Courtney was not cognitively impaired. Here's why I believe this. Courtney was described as someone who had a hard time focusing, and she would lose sight of the bigger picture. Most people who are described this way do not have a cognitive impairment. On the day of her death, Courtney showed up at work as usual. She must have used cannabis sometime before this because it was in her system, but nobody noticed behavior consistent with impairment. Unfortunately, plenty of people go to work after using cannabis. When the aircraft approached the gate, another ramp agent opened the forward cargo area. Courtney was not the one who did that. Rather, it was a different person who also violated the safety rules and approached the aircraft. I doubt that person was cognitively impaired. Rather, they just had a poor commitment to safety. Courtney's disciplinary history indicated that she did not always follow the rules. When the aircraft was taxiing to the gate, the first officer said, "So we'll see if they try and open the doors with the engine on." The captain replied, "Yeah, like those knuckleheads in Dallas." This makes it sound like approaching this aircraft with the engines running was something that other ramp agents had done, like people were not following the rules. Everywhere this aircraft landed, there was a risk of this happening. As I mentioned, the most likely theory in this case, in my opinion, is one that does not involve Courtney being cognitively impaired. Rather, she chose to disregard the rules or was not paying attention. To further break this down, if I had to choose between theory number 2 and theory number 3, I would say that Courtney chose to disregard the rules. So theory number 2 was the most likely. Her actions were deliberate. There is a sense that ramp agents sometimes took their chances, but Courtney pushed her luck way too far. Now moving to my final thoughts. Sometimes when people work in dangerous conditions, they no longer appreciate the hazards around them. They believe that nothing will ever happen to them. They can use cannabis, they can disregard safety rules, the laws of physics don't apply to them. This case is an extreme example of this attitude because the hazard was obvious. Courtney walked in front of a jet engine that was running. It's not like she could have missed it. The risk was not insidious. Furthermore, there was literally a red flashing light involved. If this type of tragedy cannot be prevented, what hope is there in cases involving risks that are less obvious? I think the lesson here is that sometimes people just find a way to cause a disaster. Recklessness can overpower any level of instruction, warning, or training. Those are my thoughts on the case of Courtney Edwards. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Just a reminder that I have a Patreon account, which currently has over 300 pre-release videos. When I put videos in pre-release mode on Patreon, they usually stay there for a few months, if not a year. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video.
I feel like there's a lot of truth to that. People just find a way to make a disaster happen. Sad. But, yeah. No one had that. No one should have had to see that. But people are unpredictable. Give me my fucking key. Damn it. I think I have to farm this key again. Even though I got it before. I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go grab something real quick. Go check on my husband, make sure he's okay. He's sick, like I was. I don't know if I gave him what I had or what. Hey, I got the key. Killed the Sunberry right in front of all of his friends, too. That's bottle pick, you say? Alright, I'll be right back. I'll put on something to play. No, Dr. Grande. I'm the best person I know.
Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Jill and Wendy
I'll be right
Blackstone. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Jill Blackstone was born in June 1962 and was raised in Bayonne, New Jersey. She had two sisters, Lisa and Wendy. Jill earned a master's degree in communication, moved to Los Angeles, California, and eventually found work as a TV producer. She worked on a number of shows like The Jerry Springer Show, The Rosie O'Donnell Show, and The Tony Danza Show. She produced 165 episodes of The Sally Jesse Raphael Show, 46 episodes of Divorce Court, and 105 episodes of Family Court with Judge Penny. As Jill was building her career as a successful producer, her sister Wendy continued to live in New Jersey. Wendy would often travel to Los Angeles to visit Jill. Due to a condition called Usher syndrome, Wendy had significant vision and hearing loss. She was not able to work. Eventually, Jill invited her sister to move to California to live with her, which Wendy did. The sisters lived in a 3-bedroom house on Landale Street in the Studio City neighborhood of Los Angeles. Jill purchased this house in 2007 for $930,000. Her mortgage was $5,055 a month. In 2012, Jill declared bankruptcy. In the filing, she indicated that she only earned about $7,400 a month after taxes. This means that 68% of her income was being used to pay her mortgage. Furthermore, Jill was $1.4 million in debt. She owed $122,000 to her sister Wendy. Despite the financial problems, Jill and Wendy ran an animal rescue out of Jill's house called Thumping Tails Animal Rescue Center. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On March 14, 2015, a veterinarian and friend of Jill Blackstone named Tracy Rice called 911 and indicated that Jill had called her and appeared to be having some type of medical issue. Tracy was worried about her friend Jill. When the paramedics arrived at Jill's house, they found her in a bedroom not wearing any clothing from the waist down. Jill told them that she fell while walking on the driveway and did not remember anything. She only woke up because the sun was beating on her neck. Believing that she had a stroke, she called her friend Tracy. From the condition of Jill's house, it was clear that dogs lived there. When the paramedics asked where the dogs were, Jill indicated they may be in the garage, along with her sister Wendy. When the paramedics entered the garage, they found 49-year-old Wendy Blackstone on the floor, dead. There were also 3 dogs in the garage. One of the dogs was dead, and another one would later die. The garage had filled with smoke from a charcoal grill, which was still burning. 56-year-old Jill Blackstone was taken to a nearby hospital, and the police were called to investigate Wendy Blackstone's death. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. 2 pieces of paper were taped on a trash can outside. 1 piece of paper had Post-it notes on it as well. The message started with the words, "Enter carefully." It went on to offer information and instructions. For example, Jill and Wendy did not want to be resuscitated. The dogs were to be cremated at the expense of Jill's estate. The gas in the house had been turned off, and a garage door opener was mounted to the wall on the left side of the door. In the house, the police found additional Post-it notes in various places, including one that read, "Wendy is loved, know that." On Jill's desk, there was a binder containing the label Last Will and Testament for Jill and Wendy. Computer passwords and the keys to Jill's Lexus were there as well. At first glance, it looked like Jill and Wendy had carried out a terrible plan of self-destruction, but the police were not sure it was that simple. They interviewed Jill at the hospital. She appeared to be happy and was talking about her career. Jill reminisced about the old days and talked about Jerry Springer. The police focused Jill's attention on the night of March 13, wanting to know what happened. Here is the story Jill supplied to them. That night, Jill and Wendy decided to celebrate the life of a beloved dog who had died sometime earlier. Using a charcoal grill and a metal trash can full of charcoal, they cooked burgers outside. As it became colder, the women decided to pull the grill and the trash can into the garage. Jill went back into the house to retrieve marshmallows. Before completing this task, she passed out on the driveway. This story made it seem like Wendy's death was accidental. But what about all those notes found by the police? The notes were consistent with the idea that this was planned, not an accident. Jill explained the notes by saying she had written them a few days earlier, hoping they would give her courage. However, she did not follow through with the plan indicated by the notes. At another point during the interview, Jill made a reference to how she may have snapped, which made it seem like she did follow through. Jill told investigators that due to Wendy's disability, her sister was completely dependent on her. Wendy could not do a lot for herself, including driving a motor vehicle. Over time, Wendy's condition only grew worse. Jill said, "Wendy is consuming my life. I was just tired of taking care of her." An autopsy was conducted on Wendy's body. The results indicated that she died from the combined effects of inhalation of combustion and aprazolam. This is a generic version of Xanax. Jill Blackstone was arrested on suspicion of murder, but then released 2 days later because the district attorney's office decided against filing charges. Prosecutors agreed this was a murder, but they wanted more evidence before moving forward. The investigation continued for 3 years. During this time, Jill moved to Hoboken, New Jersey. On March 22, 2018, a warrant was issued for Jill's arrest. The police looked for her in New Jersey, but were notified by her attorney that she was in a hospital in Baltimore. Jill was having difficulty with migraine headaches. On April 12, 2018, Jill Blackstone was arrested for murder. Eventually, she was extradited to Los Angeles. In a surprising turn of events, Jill was permitted to plead no contest to voluntary manslaughter and animal cruelty. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison and released in March 2024 after serving 6 years. Now moving to my analysis. As suggested by the no contest plea, Jill Blackstone maintains her innocence. Her lawyer indicated that she only pleaded no contest to avoid going to prison. The lawyer was essentially saying that Jill did not want to risk a life sentence. Jill has a number of supporters, including at least some of her family members. They believe that Wendy's death was an accident. Despite the outcome in this case, the state believed that Jill committed murder, and they were prepared to take the case to trial. This brings me to the question, was Jill Blackstone guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that she was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Jill had severe financial problems. Just a few months before the tragedy, in November 2014, she sold her house for $950,000. She and her sister Wendy were allowed to remain there as the new owners sought permission to demolish and rebuild. A few weeks before Wendy died, she sent an email to a friend of hers detailing an incident involving a cookie. Wendy stated that Jill gave her a cookie that tasted funny. After eating it, Wendy felt like she had been drugged. This soporific cookie story makes it seem like Jill was conducting a test run, like trying to see if she could incapacitate her sister Wendy with drugs. Not long before Wendy's death, Jill created instructions for first responders, which she left attached to a trash can and in other places. The plans were consistent with Jill believing that everyone in the house, including the 3 dogs, would be dead. Furthermore, the notes pointed to the garage as a key location and mentioned the gas had been turned off. So Jill would argue that she created this plan involving the garage and presumably some type of open flame. She then gave up on the plan, only to have Wendy end up dead in the garage next to burning charcoal. Either Jill had a tremendous amount of bad luck, or this was a murder. None of the notes were written by Wendy, and none of them contained her signature. An autopsy revealed that Wendy had a generic version of Xanax in her system, but Wendy did not have a prescription for this drug. Jill, however, did have a prescription. Prior to Wendy's death, Jill researched topics on the internet related to a gun, carbon monoxide, and poisoning. Jill acted as if Wendy's death was an accident. However, the barbecue grill that was used in the tragedy had been recently purchased. Furthermore, first responders found the garage door closed. If Jill had passed out while retrieving marshmallows, why would the garage door be closed? Jill made it seem as though Wendy was a burden, as if Wendy no longer wanted to exist. People who knew Wendy said she was future-oriented and not depressed. Furthermore, she was not a burden to Jill. Wendy largely took care of herself. She had significant vision and hearing loss, but otherwise was in exceptionally good health. Every day, Wendy exercised on a treadmill for 45 minutes. Jill told first responders that her sister and the dogs may have been in the garage. Before this, on the phone with Tracy, Jill was asked about the location of Wendy and the dogs. Jill responded, "I think they're dead in the garage." If this was an accident, as Jill indicated, how would she have known this information? Moving to the exculpatory factors, it's technically possible that Jill had a plan to wipe out everyone, but then gave up on this plan only to have an unfortunate accident that killed her sister. That's pretty much it
Yo,
for
stop it,
the
fucker.
exculpatory factors. When considering the evidence in this case, do I believe that Jill Blackstone was guilty of murder? Yes, in my opinion, she was guilty.
Help, heal me, heal me,
beyond
heal
a
me, heal
reasonable
me.
doubt. The state should not have offered a plea deal for voluntary manslaughter in this case. I believe what happened here is that the state wanted to honor the wishes of Wendy's family, who did not want Jill to remain in custody, and some of the evidence in the case had been destroyed. Getting a conviction for murder may not have been as easy as originally expected. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, in my opinion. The real mystery in this case isn't really about whether Wendy's death was an accident or not. It seems clear that Jill killed Wendy. Rather, the mystery is about what Jill intended for herself. Did she plan on surviving the entire time, or was this a failed attempt at complete annihilation? This is impossible to know. Only Jill knows this answer. If I had to guess, I would say that Jill had every intention of surviving. This is supported by the fact that she did survive. Jill didn't take responsibility for the murder because she believed her actions were justified. During her interview with the police, she said, quote, "I'm the best person I know. I devoted my life to saving animals and saving people. I'm a good person," unquote. One could argue that Jill was content with her original decision. She really didn't have any regrets. Some people found the outcome of this case to be unsatisfying, like justice was not served. They argued that Jill should have paid the price for murder, not for voluntary manslaughter. She was a producer for shows like Sally Jesse Raphael and Jerry Springer. Didn't she already bring enough pain to the world? How much more should she be permitted to get away with? Other people are more sympathetic to Jill's position. They point out that she cared for her sister for many years and probably viewed the killing as merciful as opposed to a murder. Furthermore, even though Jill evaded a life sentence, she did spend 6 years in prison and ultimately ended up in New Jersey. One could argue that's not comparable to prison, which of course is correct. New Jersey is much worse than prison. Those are my thoughts in the case of Jill and Wendy Blackstone. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Something occurred to me while researching this topic. I don't know if it's connected to what happened in this case, but it's possible. It may be connected. Sometimes people assume that people with disabilities cannot be happy due to the nature of the disability. They look at the person and say, if I had that same disability, I wouldn't be able to live a happy life. Life would not be satisfying. Now, a person is allowed to feel that way, but here's the problem. They take that feeling and project it onto the person with the disability. They use this feeling of their own to convince the other person that the normal way to think about their situation should be consistent with sadness. Another possibility is that plans are made which are not in the person's best interest. Perhaps that is what happened in this case. When people make these assumptions, they probably believe they are using empathy, like they understand what another person is feeling. They may even feel like a good person, perhaps the best person they know. In reality, this behavior is a great example of inaccurate empathy, something that, unfortunately, is all over the place.
Am I in the right place?
In mental health treatment settings. Psychotherapists are supposed to have the ability to use empathy, but not all of them possess this ability. That's why it's important that counseling programs and other psychotherapy educational programs act as gatekeepers. They must screen individuals who don't have the capability of using empathy. The best way to assess a person's level of
That's the big
satisfaction
room.
in life is to ask them, not to look at their situation and assume that they would not be satisfied. I think what happens here is that people substitute their own values for the person with a disability. They are looking inside themselves to find answers about another person. Self-centeredness is one trait that leads to inaccurate empathy. Two people can feel differently about the same circumstances. Those who have inaccurate empathy will never understand this.
I'm in the mood to listen to one of my favorite songs.
I am just a girl, just a speck of worthless dust in this rotten world. Yet I must speak to thee. There was once a time where I longed for pretty things,
but now that's changed. I long for murder. How long should I wait to celebrate my own forgiving hate? Ooh. I can't wait to be brutal. I can't wait to wield a hatchet covered with blood. You're the maggots of my eye. You're a piece of rotting pie to me. Ooh. It's been so long since you've been young. Yeah, you understand. Yes, I really. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Yeah. I am Pickles, the drummer, and I get to sing. So here too, because I'm drunk. Here, Q, I'm really drunk. Fuck you, dick weed. You too.
I'm gonna go lay down. I'm gonna go lay down now.
Ooh.
Little girls, wait!
No, she's dead. But we can bring her back to life.
I am just a girl, just a speck of worthless dust in this rotten world. Yet I must speak to thee. There was once a time where I longed for pretty things, but now that's changed.
Did I lose that key?
I long for murder. How long shall I wait
If I did, I'm gonna
to celebrate my unforgiving hate?
be annoyed.
I can't wait to be brutal. I can't wait to wield a hatchet covered with blood.
He for real only use it one time. Oh my god, dude. That's some shit. You can only use these keys for one time? So I have to go farm that key again. You know, my fault for not fucking reading the quests properly. But shit. This fucking archaic ass game. Oh. That's all in the Merry Lantern.
Little girls, wait!
Little girls wait. Um. What the fuck? That's dumb shit. Does it even say? You used it? Or you wasted? Well, let me look when I trade it in my dumb text. I wonder if I cry to a GM if they just give me another one. It'd be a waste of time, man. I don't know how often I even talk to GMs. Maybe once or twice. Hmm. Hmm. This is bullshit. I'm like forever stuck on this dumb whatchamacallit mission. But it's those these are those rank 1 through 10 missions, so they're so old and archaic that they would try to make you fucking redo some stupid shit like this if you used up one key accidentally. God, there's so much fucking text. Where's... I always lose my place. I'm just looking for a goddamn... What was I fucking fighting? And why? Daggett obtains an Uglaplev key. Mother effing. Bluffing deffing. I just want to watch video. But what? More... I can't watch Metalocalypse, I'll get fucking sued out the butt. Do. Bobo Bauer Bangers. Where's it bang? Oh yeah, I file all that shit. Daggett fucks up Thornberry. Oh right, I went through. There's no fucking text. I must have fucking filtered it out. That's why I'm going nuts right now. So, either way, I don't have a key anymore. There's no point in fighting that goddamn robot. What part of the map am I in? Ah, my dumbass fucked up. I gotta farm both keys again. Gotta go back to Dan. Do I have anything? I don't think I do. To work back fast, except maybe. Oh, I gotta go back to the book over here. Shit. Let me put on something else while I do boring shit. Uh, oops. Hmm.
feet in the sky, which makes it sound like this entry is going to be really bad.
Actually, I was kind of interested in something else. Ow.
Welcome to Elizabeth's Chronicles. If you love true crime, consider subscribing.
Maybe.
Today, we are going to look at family annihilators who predate Chris Watts. It wasn't that long ago that we all watched Chris Watts stand on his front porch asking for his wife and kids to come home, knowing inside that he had murdered them. He had no emotion. He later admitted to strangling his pregnant wife, Shannan, and their two beautiful girls, Bella and Cece.
Shannon.
But Chris Watts is not the first family annihilator. First on our list is Robert William Fisher. On April 10, 2001, at around 10 p.m., a neighbor overhears 39-year-old Navy veteran, Robert William Fisher, and his wife having a loud argument. At around 10:45 p.m., Fisher is spotted in his wife's truck, withdrawing $280 cash from an ATM, which is the most he can withdraw at a single time. At around 8:42 a.m. the next morning, a blast rings out through the neighborhood. Firefighters are called to the home of Robert William Fisher and his wife, Mary, daughter, Brittany, and son Bobby. Once firefighters were able to put out the fire, they found the bodies of Fisher's family inside. It was quickly determined they'd all been murdered. Fisher's wife was shot in the head, and her throat was viciously cut. Both children had their throats slashed.
Why?
Not long after the killings, police named Fisher as the main suspect in the murders. Police believed that Fisher killed his wife and children because he thought his wife was leaving him. He didn't want to put his children through a stressful divorce. Fisher was an experienced hunter and knew the outdoors well. He has never been found. It's suspected that he either committed suicide or has started a new life somewhere with a whole new identity. Robert William Fisher would have turned 60 years old this year. In 2015, the FBI made multiple age-progressed photos, showing how the suspected killer would look today. A $100,000 reward is still available for information leading to his arrest. Second on our list is John List. John List had the ideal life. He was by all accounts a perfect son, husband, and father. He was an established accountant at a bank in the town where he lived. He was able to provide a very comfortable life for his family. The family lived in a mansion with his mother, wife, daughter, and two sons. The home included a spacious ballroom, marble fireplaces, and a Tiffany skylight. The family lived the American dream in 1965. They went to church every Sunday, and List even taught Sunday school. From the outside looking in, everything was picture perfect. However, in 1971, John List lost his cushiony job. At the time he was 46 years old. He attempted numerous times to land another job, but his attempts failed. He could not stand the thought of telling his family that he lost his job. After losing his job, he would spend his days at the train station, during his usual work hours, reading the newspaper until time to go home. He was secretly taking money out of his mother's bank account to pay the mortgage payments. List refused to go on welfare. He did not want the embarrassment in the community. He also felt this violated his self-sufficient lifestyle that his father taught him from a young child. On November 9, 1971, John List methodically shot every member of his family, one by one. His wife was first. He sent the children off to school, and then shot her in the kitchen as she sipped her morning coffee. List then went upstairs, and shot his mother while she still slept in bed. He killed Patricia as she returned home from school, then the youngest son, Frederick. List then made himself a sandwich and sat down and ate it. He then closed out his bank accounts. He later went to his son John's soccer game and cheered him on. He drove him home and then shot him in the chest. John List placed the bodies of his family over sleeping bags in the ballroom, then wrote a note to his pastor. List thought if anyone understood what he just had to do, it would be him. List feared that his family would turn from God once faced with the evil world and poverty. He felt this was the only way to ensure their arrival to heaven. John List did not commit suicide.
When did God
though.
say
He attempted to throw the police
you
off
have to be rich
by
to go to
cleaning
heaven?
the crime scene thoroughly, and using scissors to meticulously cut himself out of every picture in the home. He called the school to let the children's teachers know that the family was going out of town on vacation, and would be gone for a few weeks. He also called, and cancelled all deliveries to the home. He switched all lights on, and had a radio playing in every room with religious hymns. He then went to bed and slept while his family lay dead. He then walked out of the front door the next morning. He was not seen again for another 18 years. A full month went by before neighbors became suspicious of the lights being on all the time, and nobody coming or going. They began to suspect something was terribly wrong. Became suspicious of the light years. A full month went by before neighbors became suspicious of the lights being on all the time, and nobody coming or going. They began to suspect something was terribly wrong. When authorities entered the house, on December 7, 1971, they heard organ music echoing through the intercom system in the home. They also found a 5-page letter from John List explaining how the decomposing bodies on the ballroom floor were his family, and killed out of mercy. He described how he had saved the souls of the people he loved. The FBI found his car at Kennedy International Airport in New York City, but they never located him. 18 years later, in 1989, prosecutors in New Jersey came up with a strategy. They used an expert forensic artist, Frank Bender, to create a physical
What the
bust of
F?
John List,
My
using
controller's being
age
really dumb.
progression.
1 second.
Bender gave him a hawk nose, larger eyebrows, and horn-rimmed glasses. Psychologists imagined that List would be wearing the same glasses he wore when younger to reminisce of his more successful days.
There we go.
The depiction of John List was remarkable. When America's Most Wanted aired the story of the John List murders, 22 million people saw the sculpture.
Damn.
Tips poured in. One came from a woman, in Richmond, Virginia, who said the sculpture looked just like her next-door neighbor, John Clark. She stated
John
he was
Clark,
also an
you
accountant
look like
and
this
attended
motherfucker
church.
on TV.
Police visited the Clark home, and spoke to his wife. She told them how she met him at a church gathering. Everything
John
unraveled
Clark,
for
my
List
d-
from
my
that
dear.
day. List
I would
changed
never
his
kill my
identity
family.
18 years ago, and had moved to Colorado,
Once.
under the name Robert Clark. And then
I mean, 2
moved to
times.
Richmond, Virginia. Police arrested John List on June 1, 1989. List was convicted, and sentenced to 5 life sentences. In an interview later on, List states that he wanted to kill himself too, but he knew if he committed suicide, that he would not get to heaven, to be with his family.
let me in.
List
killed
died
myself.
in 2008 at age 82. Next on our list is Steven Suettel. Stephen
thought that
Sueppel
said
was
Spike
born on
Spiegel
August
for a
13th,
second.
1965,
Oh my god, I'm
to
being a
parents
fucking
William and Patricia Tierney
insane
Sueppel.
troglodyte.
He graduated from Regina High School. Then graduated from the University of Northern Iowa. Stephen married Cheryl Kesterson on June 13, 1990, at St. Mary's Catholic Church. The family also attended church there. The couple later adopted 4 South Korean children:
Oh god,
Ethan,
dude.
age 10, Seth, age 9, Mira, age 5, and Eleanor, age 3. The family lived in Iowa City, Iowa.
What?
Stephen was vice president and controller at Hills Bank and Trust Company in Hills, Iowa. In February of 2008, Stephen Sueppel was indicted by a federal grand jury on charges of embezzlement and money laundering. $559,000 was stolen from his former employer, the Hills Bank and Trust Company of Hills, in Iowa. Sueppel had entered a plea of not guilty, but had admitted to investigators that he had diverted the funds to a personal account. He was granted bond, and his trial was scheduled for April 2008. On March 29, the family attended Easter Mass as usual. Later that evening, around 8 p.m., a family friend stops by and visits with Stephen. At 11:30 p.m. that same night, Stephen leaves a message for his father and brother at their law firm. In the message he indicates that his family is in heaven. On the same night, according to a letter Stephen wrote, he puts his 4 children into the family van, which was parked in the garage, and tries to kill the kids, and himself, by carbon monoxide poisoning. This attempt fails. So Stephen brings the children back into the home, and bludgeons them to death with a baseball bat. The 3 older children were found in their bedrooms. Eleanor, the youngest, was located downstairs, in the toy room. Stephen leaves several messages throughout the night, at different times, as he attempts to commit suicide, each time failing. On Monday at 6:31 a.m., Stephen calls 911, he directs them to go to the home of Stephen and Cheryl Sueppel. He tells them to go there immediately. The call then disconnects. Just a few moments later, at 6:36 a.m. Stephen Sueppel commits suicide by crashing his car into a concrete pillar. He was driving over 80 miles an hour. When police arrived at his home, they found Sueppel's wife Cheryl, and their 4 children, dead of multiple blunt force trauma injuries to their upper bodies and heads. Authorities recovered the murder weapons, 2 baseball bats, at the scene. On March 29, 2008, St. Mary's Church in Iowa City held a Catholic funeral mass for all 6 members of the Sueppel family. The church's decision to give Stephen Sueppel, a multiple murderer, a Catholic funeral caused controversy among Catholics. Next on our list is John Sharp. John Sharp was born on February 28, 1967. He grew up in Mornington. Sharp met his wife, Anna Kemp, at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where they both worked. They got married in October of 1994. They lived together in numerous locations around the Mornington Peninsula area, south of Melbourne. Sharp was self-employed as a conveyancer. Their daughter, Gracie, was born in August of 2002. She was born with a medical condition called hip dysplasia, an abnormality in her hips, which required orthopedic treatment by wearing a harness for the first 3 months of her life. She cried a lot, and had difficulty sleeping. This placed some strain on the marriage. Even after the harness was no longer required, Gracie still had issues with feeding and sleeping. Anna had to have therapy due to the issues with Gracie. In 2003, Sharp purchased a high-powered spear gun, along with a second spear, from a sports store, known as Sport Philip Marine, in Mornington. He had not previously shown any interest in spear fishing. He practiced in their backyard until he could operate the spear gun effectively. Soon after, in September 2003, the Sharps purchased the house at 116 Prince Street, Mornington. In November of that year, when their daughter, Gracie, was around 15 months old, Anna became pregnant again. Sharp later told investigators that this pregnancy came as a surprise to him. Sharp decided that he did not want another child, he felt that one was enough of a burden, and he began to resent his wife and the unborn child. On March 21, 2004, the Sharp family attended a nephew's birthday party. Family members reported nothing out of the ordinary. On March 23, Sharp and his wife argued before going to bed at around 10 p.m. At some point, he got out of the bed and retrieved the spear gun from the garage. He returned to the bedroom, aimed and fired the spear from a distance of a few centimeters into his pregnant wife's left temple. He noticed she was still breathing, so Sharp fired a second spear into her head, killing her. He covered the body in towels, then went downstairs and slept on a fold-out sofa bed.
God damn.
The next morning, Sharp attempted to retrieve the spears from his wife's head but could not.
What?
He took Gracie to childcare and picked her up. He also kept a TV repairman from entering the home to keep the body hidden. Later in the day, he buried his wife in the backyard. Sharp went back to the sports store, with his daughter with him, and purchased another spear. On March 27, 2004, he put his daughter to bed, then drank several glasses of whiskey mixed with coke to numb his senses. He then loaded his spear gun with the spear and fired it into the head of his sleeping daughter, penetrating her skull. Gracie did not die. She began screaming loudly. Sharp then located the two spear shafts that he removed from his wife's skull before burying her. With his daughter still screaming, he fires both spears into her head. Gracie still did not die. He then pulled one spear out of his daughter's head and fired it again into her head, killing her. He left Gracie dead in the bed and went to bed. The next morning, he returned to Gracie's bedroom and pulled the spears from her head while holding a towel over her face, saying he could not bear to look upon her. He then wrapped her body in garbage bags and wrapped her in black duct tape. He disposed of her body at the Mornington Refuse Transfer Station, along with the spear gun, spears, her clothes and some toys. On March 29, 2004, Sharp visited a local hardware store in Frankston where he bought a roll of duct tape, 2 tarpaulins and an electric chainsaw. The next day, he unearthed the body of his wife, and cut her body into 3 pieces. He then wrapped each part in a tarp. He then dumped her body parts and the chainsaw in waste bins at the Mornington transfer station. That evening, he sent an email to Anna's family in New Zealand, pretending to be his wife, to create the impression that Anna was still alive. However, his email had the opposite effect. He raised concerns from her family, and Anna's mother reported her disappearance to police in Dunedin, New Zealand. When questioned, Sharp told authorities that Anna had taken their daughter and moved to nearby Chelsea, a suburb of Melbourne. He denied any involvement in her disappearance. He sent flowers from his wife to his mother on her birthday in an attempt to throw off the investigation. In May of 2004, Sharp gives several media interviews, and appeared on national TV, speaking of his wife and daughter's disappearance. He said, "Anna, our marriage may be over but I still love you, and you are the mother of our beautiful daughter Gracie, whom we both adore more than anyone else." He said he spoke to his wife just a week earlier, and asked for anyone with information to come forward. He claimed that she ran off with another man. On May 20, 2004, New Zealand authorities requested Victoria Police to investigate the disappearance of Anna Kemp and her daughter, Gracie. Mornington Police went to the home of Sharp and spoke with him. He was then interviewed again on June 10. He maintained that Anna left on March 23 and he didn't know her whereabouts. On June 22, 2004, police arrested John Sharp. During his interview, he continued to deny knowing anything about his wife's disappearance, but in a subsequent interview he confesses. He said he killed his wife because she was controlling and moody, and the marriage was unhappy. He told authorities, "I was thinking of taking care of Gracie by myself, and just amongst all this madness, that's when I lost the plot." Family members state Sharp may have actually killed his wife because she uncovered that he had been abusing their daughter, Gracie. Family reveal several letters where Sharp had a history of sexual abuse among children in the family. Police began a massive search that lasted weeks. The bodies of both Anna and Gracie were located at the Mornington landfill site. Sharp pleaded guilty at the Supreme Court of Victoria. On August 5, 2005, Sharp was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum period of 33 years where he could not be paroled. Sharp currently resides in protective custody due to threats from fellow inmates. With family annihilators, it appears the majority of these men were harboring deep, dark secrets that led to them destroying their entire families. For Chris Watts, it was an affair. For John List, he lost his cushiony job and couldn't bring himself to face his family with the truth. He felt annihilating them was a better option. For Stephen Suepel, his theft of company money and pending prison sentence drove him over the edge. For John Sharp, he held a secret resentment for his unborn child and wife. Maybe a lesson could be learned from these horrific tragedies. Keeping secrets from those you love may not be the best option. That concludes this episode. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Enjoyed?
Welcome to Elizabeth's Chronicles. If you love true crime, consider subscribing, and hit that like button. Family Annihilators Who Predate Chris Watts, Volume 2. If you haven't watched the first part to this series, check out the link in the description area. Chris Watts shocked people across the world when he described in horrific detail how he murdered his pregnant wife, Shannan, and his beautiful daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Cece. In letters to Shell and Cale he goes into more graphic detail. He now claims that an evil force was controlling him. Chris Watts isn't the first man to murder his entire family. Let's look at a few other family annihilators who predate Chris Watts. On the Welsh borders sits a beautiful well-to-do village called Maesbrook, Shropshire. The Georgian mansions are vine-covered and absolutely breathtaking. Range Rovers and Porsches line the driveways, and the people are, for the most part, self-made millionaires. Mostly entrepreneurs
Yay,
from
another
Wolverhampton
key.
or Birmingham. Christopher Foster was one of those self-made millionaires who made it big. In
Shit.
1997, Foster had a
How did I get here?
remarkable
Oh,
idea.
I gotta go.
At the
Fucking-
time, oil rigs could easily catch fire, due to the insulation notwithstanding the high temperatures. He felt he could make something that could withstand the temperatures. He used special rubber and plastic, and invented a prototype, and spent every dime he had to do the testing. He held his breath as the testing ensued. To his amazement, the prototype worked. Oil companies began placing huge orders. Foster called his invention Ulva Shield. Foster's business was booming, and so was his spending. He purchased several very expensive cars, a mansion, as well as many other luxury items. Over time, his spending exceeded his income, and he was buried in debt. Financial pressures increased, so Foster found a cheaper supplier in the US for his raw materials. This breached his exclusive contract with British supplier, DRC. This was a huge mistake. By 2005, DRC was stuck with a huge warehouse full of Ulva Shield it could not sell, because it was patterned to Foster. DRC took Foster to court. At the Royal Courts of Justice, on February 28, 2008, Lord Justice Reimer stated that Foster was bereft of the basic instincts of commercial morality.
I say,
He was not to be trusted.
you are not to be trusted.
DRC won the lawsuit, and control of Foster's patent. Foster may have been lacking in moral commerce, but he knew how to invent a groundbreaking, new fireproof chemical formula. Under DRC's less flashy stewardship, Ulva Shield became a huge deal in the oil rig business, supplying to BP, Exxon, Shell, and 39 other big names. At this point, Foster had little to do but look at his horses and 15 acres of land. His family knew nothing of his financial ruin. Foreclosure of his beautiful mansion was looming. On August 26, 2008, Christopher Foster returned from a neighbor's barbecue and systematically destroyed everything he owned. He did not spare his family in the destruction. He shot his wife, Jill, in the back of the head, while she lay sleeping in bed. He then shot his 15-year-old daughter, Kirsty, in her bedroom, interrupting her as she chatted with friends. He shot all his horses and dogs, and then jammed a horsebox against the gate, and shot out the tires, in an attempt to keep anyone from entering before everything was completely destroyed. He flooded the mansion with oil, set everything on fire, and then lay down next to his dead wife, dying of smoke inhalation. At 4:50 a.m. an explosion woke neighbors, who then called police. The horse box delayed their entry, losing valuable time to salvage evidence. By the time they could move the horse box and enter, everything was destroyed. At first, the police assumed the family was away for the weekend, and with Foster's shady business dealings, including rumors he had run-ins with the Russian mafia, this looked very much like a warning: pay us what you owe us, or else. Once the police located the CCTV footage, they knew it was Christopher Foster, himself, who had murdered his entire family, then set his house on fire, and then committed suicide. He felt murdering his entire family, and taking his own life was a better option than being honest about his financial loss, and starting over. Christian Michael Longo was born on January 23, 1974, and originated from Michigan. In 1993, he married Mary Jane Baker. The Longos were, for the most part, a normal, middle-class family that lived in Walport, Oregon. Christian Longo was a manager at a local Starbucks, and Mary Jane worked as a Walmart cashier. The family were Jehovah's Witnesses, and were active members of their church. Both were born into the faith. The two were the doting parents of their 3 young children, ranging in age from 2 to 4 years old. On December 17, 2001, the Longest children didn't show up for school, and Mary Jane did not show up for work, which was not typical of her. A neighbor reported seeing her 1999 Dodge Grand Caravan parked in the driveway of the Longest house. Mary Jane's purse, keys, and cigarettes were in the car's dashboard. Nobody had seen the family since church on Sunday morning, which was the day before. After relatives and neighbors realized something was wrong, they notified the authorities and a search began. What could have happened to the Longo family? 2 days later, on December 19th, that question would be answered. First, the body of 4-year-old Zachary Longo was found floating in the Alsea River. Tied to his leg was a pillowcase filled with rocks. Just a few days later, divers located the body of 3-year-old Sadie. She also had a pillowcase full of rocks tied to her leg. On December 26th, divers located 2 suitcases. Inside contained the bodies of 34-year-old Mary Jane Longo's nude body, and the couple's youngest child, Madison, age 2. Their bodies had been weighed down with dumbbells. Authorities quickly put the clues together, and discovered Christian Longo's law-breaking history, and financial recklessness. Longo had been involved in criminal behavior for many years. He previously worked for New York Times Distribution Company, but had left, and attempted to start his own company. This ended in disaster. He was swimming in debt, so he resorted to writing counterfeit checks from clients. He continued living a lavish lifestyle of purchasing expensive cars, and going on vacations. He was given a light sentence for the check fraud, with only probation, and forced to pay restitution. Longo was then caught cheating on his wife, and kicked out of the church. He then uprooted his family, and moved a few times before settling in Oregon. As the mystery continued to unfold, authorities were shocked when they realized exactly how he murdered his family. Christian Longo strangled his wife, Mary Jane, and his daughter, Madison, in the family's home, and then stuffed their bodies into suitcases, weighed them down with dumbbells, then loaded them into the trunk of his car. He then carried sleeping Zachary and Sadie into the car, and drove to the bridge over Lint Slough, an inlet of Alsea River. Longo then tied rock-filled pillowcases to his children's legs, and tossed them alive into the water beneath him. He coldly turned away, and drove off as though nothing had happened. Using stolen credit cards, he flew to Cancun, Mexico, and was staying at a seaside resort, assuming a new identity of New York Times reporter, Michael Finkel. He went on to party at the beach, drink, hit the nightclubs, and even romanced a German tourist. Meanwhile, in a strange twist, the Times had discovered that the real Michael Finkel had fabricated part of a story in a major exposé he had written on modern slave trading. So while Longo was pretending to be Finkel, the real Finkel was getting fired, and shamed from journalism. The FBI placed Christian Longo on its 10 most wanted list, and tracked him down to Cancun in January 2002. Local authorities immediately released into FBI custody. He was charged with multiple counts of aggravated murder and unlawful flight. He was sentenced to death in 2003. Mary Jane's friends later revealed to police that the couple had planned to divorce, but continued living together, in order to separate their finances due to Longo's frivolous spending habits. Several years later, Christian Longo admitted that he is a narcissist in a letter he wrote to a television station located in Portland, Oregon. He wrote that he eventually began studying what a psychologist said about him, and had came to terms with it. The psychologist concluded that Longo had a narcissistic personality disorder, that he was self-centered, and that he had a damaged core sense of self. James Urban Rupert was born on March 29, 1934. His early life was troubled. His mother, Charity Rupert, often told him he was a mistake, and that she had wanted a daughter. His father, Leonard, was a violent man, with a hot temper. He showed no affection for his two sons. He passed away in 1947, when James was only 12 and his brother, Leonard Jr., was 14. Leonard Jr., his brother, became the head of the family. James claimed his older brother constantly picked on him. James did not do any better in school, his grades were poor, and he had few friends. He was also much smaller than the other kids. As an adult, he was only 5 foot 6 inches tall, and weighed 135 pounds. At the age of only 16, James was so unhappy at home that he ran away, and attempted suicide by hanging himself with a sheet. The attempted failed, so he returned home. He grew more resentful toward his brother when he flunked out of college, while his brother went on to earn an electrical engineering degree. On top of that, Leonard went on to marry Alma, one of only 2 girlfriends James ever dated. Leonard and Alma would go on to have 8 children together. Leonard landed a job with General Electric, while James, at age 41, was unemployed and still living with his mother. To make matters worse, James owed his mother and brother large amounts of money that he had borrowed when the stock market of 1973-74 crashed. His mother, Charity, was aggravated with his constant drinking and not being able to hold a steady job. She threatened to kick him out. This triggered something in James. On March 29, 1975, which ironically was James' birthday, witnesses reported seeing James shooting at cans, using a .357 Magnum along the edge of the Great Miami River in Hamilton. Later in the night, he went to the 19th Hole Cocktail Lounge, and spoke with an employee there, Wanda Bishop. She reported later that he discussed his mother threatening him with eviction and seemed depressed. He spoke about needing to solve the problem. He exited the bar at 11 p.m. that night and returned a little bit later. Wanda asked him if he had solved his problem yet, and he answered, "Not yet." He stayed until closing time, 2:30 a.m. The next morning, which happened to be Easter Sunday, Leonard and his wife, Alma, brought their 8 children to see their grandmother. James was
8.
upstairs, sleeping after being out drinking the night before. The children enjoyed an Easter egg hunt in the front yard. Charity, Alma, and Leonard finished prepared lunch in the kitchen. The children, after finishing the egg hunt, came inside and played in the living room. At around 4 p.m., James woke up, loaded his .357 Magnum, 222 caliber handguns, and a rifle, and made his way downstairs. He entered the kitchen, and shot and killed Leonard, Alma, and Charity. He also shot and killed his nephew, David, and his nieces, Teresa and Carol.
The fuck?
James then entered the living room, where he killed his niece, Anne, and his 4 remaining nephews, Leonard III, Michael, Thomas, and John. He killed each of his victims by first taking a disabling shot, and then a shot to the head or heart. He had wiped out his family in less than 5 minutes. James waited for over 3 hours before phoning the police. They arrived to James waiting on them inside the front door. The police described the scene as a slaughterhouse. They stated that there was so much blood splashed about the house, that it was dripping through the floorboards, down into the basement. The community was shocked. The massacre made headlines around the country. People who knew James and the family were in disbelief that he was capable of such a horrific crime. They recalled him being quiet and gentle and the perfect neighbor. James was quickly arrested and charged with 11 counts of aggravated homicide. He remained silent and would not answer any questions. He made it perfectly clear that he was going to plead insanity. Prosecution believed that he was going to plead insanity, then be treated, and miraculously healed, then released to inherit $300,000 in inheritance. The trial was conducted in Hamilton, with a 3-judge panel. He was found guilty on all 11 counts of murder, and sentenced to life in prison. A mistrial was then declared, and a second trial was held in Findlay, Ohio, due to not finding an impartial jury near his hometown. The second trial was held in June of 1975. New evidence came out about James's target practice, and his statements at the bar. In July of the same year he received 11 consecutive life sentences. James appealed, and in 1982 a new trial was granted. His defense attorney, Hugh D. Holbrook, was convinced that his client was criminally insane, and spent his own money hiring experts from all over the country. On July 23, a 3-judge panel found James guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder for his mother and brother, but found him not guilty for reasons of insanity for the other 9 counts. He was sentenced to 2 life sentences to be served consecutively. He's currently serving his time at Franklin Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio, a unit of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. He was granted his first parole board hearing in 1995, and again in 2015, but both were denied. What would drive someone to annihilate their entire family? For Christopher Foster it was his financial ruin, and not wanting to give up his luxurious lifestyle. The thought of telling his family they were about to lose their beautiful mansion was not going to happen. To him, they were all better off dead. For Christian Longo, a new life without his wife and children drove him to commit unimaginable crimes. He selfishly partied, and enjoyed the time he had before being arrested as though they never existed. For James Rupert, a life of being pushed around, jealousy of his older brother, and threats of eviction by his mother, drove him to murder every member of his family. No matter how much we try to understand how someone can bring themselves to kill their own family members, especially children, it will never make sense. It's pure evil. That concludes Volume 2 of Family Annihilators Who Predate Chris Watts.
Damn, there's fucking 30. Oh my god, there's over. There's too many family annihilators. Is this what late stage capitalism is? Families can't realistically exist. Like, you just can't look at like a TV show and think, hey, I can have that family. No. Maybe we should dial it back. Maybe watch something a little bit more crazy or entertaining. I'm not dying, am I? Not yet.
Around Christmas this year, violent mobs rampaged through Maputo, the capital of Mozambique. Chinese-owned supermarkets were the first to suffer. An armored vehicle, originally provided by China to help maintain stability, was hijacked and used to ram open the gates of Chinese shops. The two-story metal shutters crashed down with sharp screams and frenzied curses filling the air. Store after store was ransacked. Everything in sight, from rice to televisions, sound systems to general goods, were looted. In just a few hours, several large Chinese supermarkets in the city center, with inventory worth millions of yuan, were completely emptied. The looting didn't stop there. Shops were set on fire, with thick smoke billowing from the scenes captured in videos. The China-Mozambique Agricultural Technology Center, part of an official cooperation project, was also vandalized. Protesters claimed it symbolized corrupt deals, and destroyed whatever they could. If it could be torn down or burned, they did it. Their goal was to humiliate the current Mozambican government. Whether there are masterminds or conspiracies fueling the violence, it remains unclear. But one thing is certain: anti-Chinese sentiment has spread, and the government forces were unable to control the situation. In the first few days, the riots were concentrated in major cities like Maputo, but by December 27, the violence had spread to surrounding towns. More and more areas were caught in the chaos of looting, arson, and violence. In remote areas, police forces were already understaffed and poorly equipped. Now, officers could only defend police stations and had no capacity to patrol. As a result, once peaceful towns descended into disaster. By the time the government realized the severity of the situation, troops were hastily deployed. but even the military struggled to
Right,
deal
man.
with the masked mobile
Hey,
riders.
hey, hey.
Criminal gangs seized the opportunity, looting supplies and setting
I
factories
was
ablaze
just
under the banner of anti-government protests.
watching
One
and
group
playing
even
a
stormed a
game.
prison, freeing 150 inmates by force. The trigger for these riots was Mozambique's recent elections. The ruling Mozambique
I hope you're having a
Democratic
good
Socialist
night.
Party, Frelimo, pulled out all the stops
I'll
to
turn
maintain its
down.
grip on power. Allegations of backroom deals and electoral fraud were rampant. On December 23rd, Mozambique's Constitutional Council officially announced that Frelimo's candidate, Daniel Chapo, won with 65% of the vote.
I'm just
This ensured
chilling
the
and
long-standing ruling party in power
I was waiting on
continue to govern. But the announcement
uh-oh,
was
Batonberry
immediately
sees
met with
me.
widespread skepticism. It was obvious to many that the results were questionable. Opposition candidate
My friend
Shio
Vince.
was the first to protest. He outright rejected
We
the
were gonna
official
hang, I
results,
think.
presenting his team's vote counts as evidence that he was the legitimate winner.
But I don't
The
know
European
where
Union
he's
Observer
at.
Mission also weighed in, reporting they had witnessed irregularities during the counting process and
Oh, shit.
unjustified
Oh,
changes
robot.
to results at polling stations. Mondlane responded forcefully, declaring he would hold his own inauguration next month. In the TikTok live stream, he even directly appealed to incoming US President Trump, requesting international intervention. The tension is noticeable. One could even feel it through the screen. Mondlane's confidence is not unfounded. The Election Commission's report is riddled with inconsistencies. Fraud was blatant, with vote counts manually altered in pencil. It's as if the authorities believed the entire nation wouldn't notice. Mondlane's supporters erupted, launching the largest and most intense anti-government protests since Mozambique's independence. The demonstrations quickly spiraled out of control. In Maputo alone,
What the hell?
237 stores were looted, with over 100 belonging to Chinese owners. Chinese aid projects and businesses were also targeted, seen as political accomplices and ransacked. Local businesses have been completely paralyzed. In Chibuto, Gaza province, a Chinese-owned supermarket was looted simply because of rumors that the owner was close to the mayor, marking it as a political accomplice. Another Chinese tourism project linked to the president, Felipe Nyusi, was smashed to pieces by rioters. The situation has escalated to extremes. Some interpret it as local forces resisting a pro-China government, while others see it as the people's long-standing resentment towards the corrupt ruling party finally finding an outlet. At its core, the Mozambique Frelimo Party has roots in communism. When it was founded in 1962, the Soviet Union and China supplied weapons, trained soldiers, and even taught them how to organize and spread propaganda. After Mozambique gained independence from Portuguese rule in 1975, Frelimo took power, modeling itself after the Soviet Union by modeling a socialist state, implementing land reforms, nationalizing businesses, and enforcing a planned economy. However, the collapse of the Soviet Union left them without external support, forcing Mozambique to abandon communism in 1994 in favor of multi-party democracy and a market economy. Despite this, Frelimo's authoritarian nature persisted. It monopolized political power and became deeply entrenched in corruption. Today, electoral chaos is a continuation of this complex history. While public discontent and resistance represent decades of accumulated frustration erupting over electoral fraud.
Yay.
Considering Mozambique's
I think that's all I
economic
need.
struggles, despite being rich in resources like gemstones, natural gas, and precious timber, ordinary people can barely afford to eat. Public infrastructure is crumbling, inflation is high, unemployment is widespread, and yet Chinese businesses are seen working hand in hand
Sponsor.
with government officials to quietly siphon off the country's wealth.
After you have all three
Opposition
keys,
parties have
select
seized on
the
this
second
issue,
door
accusing Chinese investment
to spawn two
propping
doll
up the corrupt
items.
government, directing protesters' anger towards Chinese businesses. Some research institutions have revealed that Chinese investment
After you have
into projects
like,
in
select the
Cabo
second
Delgado
door,
province and Maputo have enriched officials, while the poor
the one that you
remain
can't open.
destitute. Widespread resentment towards the wealthy has fueled a wave of anti-Chinese violence, spiraling out of control. Mobs swarm Chinese warehouses like locusts, taking everything they carry, regardless of its value. Before leaving, they set fires, driven by a twisted sense of retribution born from hopelessness and despair. People are left asking, why are Chinese businesses being targeted in Mozambique? The answer lies in how many Chinese people live there, often running large supermarkets, mining operations, and tourism ventures. At first, their lives were comfortable, and their businesses thrived through close relationships with local officials. Bribes and backdoor deals made permits and licenses easy to obtain. But what angered locals the most was the timber trade. Year after year, unchecked deforestation has led to the illegal export of timber to China worth $23 million annually. The scale of deforestation could cover thousands of football fields. Even more alarming, some Chinese companies pay off local terrorist groups to protect their logging operations, with as much as 10% of their profits going to armed militants. This revenue stream nets terrorists nearly $2 million a month. The rosewood in northern Mozambique is internationally protected, but Chinese traders continue to smuggle it by bribing officials for logging permits. Corrupt Frelimo officials benefit from these transactions and see no incentive to stop them. At the same time, local workers endure harsh treatment. They earn just $67 a month and are often verbally or physically abused. It's no wonder Mozambicans resent Chinese businesses, viewing them as co-conspirators of corruption and ecological destruction. Locals rely on the land to survive, only to watch their forests vanish and resources drained by Chinese firms. Insurgents profit from the timber trade, intensifying conflict, and ordinary people's hatred grows. Recent investigations reveal that between October 2023 and March 2024, 300 containers of redwood totaling 10,000 tons were seized in Beria port, valued at $18 million. The shipments were bound for China, with many lacking proper legal documentation. Ultimately, unscrupulous traders sacrificed Mozambique's ecology and livelihoods for profit, tarnishing the reputation of Chinese businesses. As opposition forces rise and public anger builds, Chinese nationals are labeled corrupt accomplices, leading to attacks and looting. It mirrors the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where resentment toward Chinese mining firms runs high. Crackdowns and mass arrests of Chinese workers no longer surprise anyone. For years, China has poured massive funds into Africa, building roads, bridges, and buildings under the banner of China-Africa Brotherhood. In reality, these ventures extract resources and expand political influence at the expense of Chinese taxpayers. While ordinary Chinese citizens struggle with long hospital queues and rising education costs, aid to Africa continues to flow without restraint.
That was a
The
cutscene.
recent anti-Chinese riots in Mozambique and the DRC have cast doubt on the strength of this brotherhood and left many in China feeling deceived and exploited. Some voices defend Chinese businesses, blaming local workers for being lazy and inefficient. But reality shows that arrogance and discrimination towards locals inevitably spark public backlash. Many Chinese firms exclusively hire Chinese workers, marginalizing or exploiting local labor, fueling discontent. Chinese aid projects are siphoned off by corrupt officials, leaving little for ordinary people. Scandals like the Chinese female companions policy, providing African students with scholarships and stipends, have fueled domestic outrage. Often, the beneficiaries are the children of African elites who later join the cycle of power and wealth, while ordinary citizens remain impoverished and resentful. Seeing the riots and anti-Chinese sentiment in Mozambique, it's clear that similar crises are brewing across Africa, whether in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kenya, Nigeria, or Tanzania. Those who benefit make fortunes, while the majority are left with nothing. The growing discontent among the majority is fueled by the close ties between authorities and Chinese businesses. Moreover, Western powers are unlikely to miss the chance to curb China's influence in Africa, encouraging protests that paint China as the new colonialist. The most absurd part is that Chinese nationals in Mozambique thought that by helping the Chinese government support the ruling party, building infrastructure, and delivering equipment, they would receive protection. But when armed mobs came knocking, embassy's response was dismissive. Either this is a local issue, handle it yourselves, or the foreign ministry line is busy. Even if someone managed to get through, the response was often, "We're not sure what's happening there." As desperate Chinese merchants posted videos pleading for help, public opinion in China erupted with sarcasm and ridicule. Big spender abroad, dead silent when it comes to protecting citizens. Wolf warrior diplomacy turns into turtle diplomacy when real wolves show up. These kinds of jokes have spread rapidly. Those with foreign passports booked flights immediately, while those holding Chinese passports had no choice but to endure the violence. Some could only joke bitterly, "If things get worse, I'll pretend to be Korean or Japanese. Maybe I'll get beaten less." As ridiculous as it sounds, it reflects the harsh reality. In some areas, Chinese nationals reportedly armed themselves, buying guns for self-defense. When mobs arrived, they were ready to fight back. This kind of self-rescue may work in the short term, but risks breaking local laws and escalating tensions further. In Africa, gunfights rarely end well. The locals knew the terrain, and if things spiral out of control, Chinese nationals are at a severe disadvantage. But beyond arming themselves and sticking together, there seem to be few alternatives. Evacuation is dangerous. Armed groups lie in wait to rob Chinese merchants, seeing them as easy targets. Political resentment adds fuel to the fire, making escape as perilous as staying. The anger isn't limited to Mozambique. Videos from the Democratic Republic of the Congo show Chinese nationals being beaten, humiliated, and even tied up and mocked in public. Do locals hate the Chinese by nature? No. It's because they see no future, no respect, and lash out at the most visible scapegoat. Officials blame populist extremists and irrational mobs, but more reports point to Chinese businesses bribing officials, damaging the environment, and hiring armed groups to evict villagers and seize resources. Chinese workers dispatched to Africa have long learned to shut down operations during elections to avoid risk. Mobs make no distinction. Anyone can be dragged from their car and burned alive. A number of Chinese aid workers have lost their lives abroad. On October 13th, 2024, a Chinese professional and his wife working at a transmit site in Brazzaville in the Republic of Congo were shot during a robbery. His wife lost her life instantly, while he was wounded. The local government promised an investigation, but most know these cases rarely lead to real justice. A specialist named Jiang from Wanzhou district in Chongqing was fatally stabbed by robbers in Monrovia, Liberia. By the time she arrived at the hospital, she had lost too much blood. As for the many medical aid workers long stationed in Africa, countless have been robbed, held hostage, or infected with malaria and other diseases. In recent years, China has poured money into Africa, building ports, mining, and large-scale infrastructure. But looking back, the gap between the promised benefits for the people and the actual results is glaring. The average African citizen has gained little, while officials and Chinese businesses' elites quietly reap the rewards. Public patience has its limits. Though riots may be temporarily suppressed by police and military force, history shows that such resentment and unrest tend to grow, ready to erupt again at any moment. What comes next remains uncertain. Can the opposition seize power? While the Chinese merchants who lost everything return home or seek opportunities in other African nations, will an external power step in, turning Mozambique into another battleground for geopolitical influence? No one knows for sure. But one thing is clear. If China continues
I've been
its
stuck on
work
this for
Africa
too long.
under the
Right
guise of
now,
brotherhood,
motherfucker!
the suffering of local
Yo!
anti-Chinese violence, revenge,
Rank 9,
conflict
and I got
will
some
only
go.
escalate.
80k. What? Oh my god. I got rank 9. Oh, the China Observer. So I think I'm gonna log out here and go see if Vince wants to chill for a bit. But Tech and Games, thanks for stopping by. If you're still there, I'll message you on Discord in a bit. But take care. Love you, love you. This is a short. How long was this? Almost 3 hours. Shit. Alright, but I'm gonna get going. Take care. Love you, love you. Bye. Peace out. Bye, bye, bye. I got rank 9. Later, later. Bye, bye. Love